I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
Having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
with the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis?
Correct.
Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it.
Meanwhile, you had a spokesperson for Vance trying to clear up any rumor that the vice president is at odds with Trump, saying Vice President Vance unequivocally supports this administration's foreign policy. The president and the vice president have had subsequent conversations about this matter and are in complete agreement. And then, with all this craziness, the story's been blowing up online. We've seen people condemning Rubio because he previously called Hillary Clinton irresponsible for using a private email server. The likes of Tim Walz just saying Pete Hegseth texting out war plans like invites to a frat party. And Elizabeth Warren asking what other highly sensitive national security conversations are happening over group chat. Any other random people accidentally added to those too? You then also had Senate Armed Service Ranking Member Jack Reed calling the breach, if true, one of the most egregious failures of operational security and common sense I have ever seen. And while all of this is still developing and reactions are still coming in, we've even seen some GOP members kind of concerned with, for example, Senator John Cornyn saying the whole incident sounds like a huge screw up. Is there any other way to describe it? But then also telling reporters that he hoped that the intelligence community would look into this. And on top of all that, he added a journalist to a chat with classified information. So 1, yikes. 2, we'll keep our eyes open to see what happens next. And 3, I'd love to know your thoughts here. Then from that, we got to talk about how there is a war going on inside of the Democratic Party right now, and both sides think of the fate of our country as at stake. Or with one of the things we're seeing being Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer coming under attack from both progressives and moderates over the weekend for what they say was his surrender to the GOP. And that, of course, because he cleared the way for a short-term spending measure known as a continuing resolution to pass last week, keeping the government funded through the end of September. A move which provoked uproar and outrage from some within his own party who thought he should have used the filibuster to demand concessions from the other party. With even former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi still backing Schumer as Senate leader, but also criticizing his decision.
I myself don't give away anything for nothing. And I think that's what happened the other day. We could have, in my view, perhaps gotten them to agree to a third way. They may not have agreed to it, but at least the public would have seen they're not agreeing to it.
And although, Schumer still enjoys public backing in the Senate, some House Democrats as well as outside groups have reportedly been pushing for a new leader, arguing that 8 years is enough. Schumer needs to step down just like Biden did when voters lost confidence in him and pass the torch to someone more aggressive. But with that, you had Schumer defending himself over the weekend, claiming that the Democrats had no leverage to negotiate any concessions and telling NBC's Meet the Press.
Look, I'm not stepping down. The CR was certainly bad, the continuing resolution, but a shutdown would be 15 or 20 times worse. And the courts have ruled it's solely up to the executive what to shut down. With Musk and Doge and Trump and this guy Vogt, they would eviscerate the federal government. On day 2, they could say, oh, SNAP, feeding hungry children, not essential. On day 4, mass transit, all transit, aid to the states, not essential. We're cutting it. On day 6, Medicaid, we'll cut that by 20, 30, 50, 80%. We'll go after Social Security. We'll go after the veterans. And one senator, Republican, told a Democratic senator, colleague of mine, and this guy is close, this Republican senator is close to the Doge Musk people, they would keep the government shut down for 6 months, 9 months, a year, till everyone was furloughed and gone and quit. And there'd be no way to stop it.
With Schumer then going on to say that he and the party are working to expose how bad Trump's policies are through oversight hearings, the courts, legislation, and organizing across the country so that by 2026, congressional Republicans will realize that they're rats on a sinking ship. But notably, you have critics arguing that the actual merits of Schumer's vote are irrelevant because he's not just the leader of his Senate colleagues, he's also a leader for Democrats across the country. Right? And saying that if he can't stir up the kind of feeling that people need to mobilize against the Republicans, then the party needs someone else who can rise to the needs of this moment. Or maybe someone younger, more progressive, more inspiring, basically someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. With AOC's name reportedly getting tossed around behind closed doors as well as in public. With the scene, for example, Progressive Representative Ro Khanna being asked during CNN's State of the Union on Sunday whether AOC should primary Schumer when his seat's up for re-election in 2028.
I haven't talked to her directly, but I think it's for her. But here's what I will say. The American people are fed up with the old guard. There needs to be a renewal. In Silicon Valley, when a company isn't doing well, you don't keep the same team. And I think there's going to be a new generation in this country. They want to see a more compelling economic message.
And while, AOC herself hasn't revealed her own feelings about a Senate run, she notably just concluded a fighting oligarchy tour across Nevada, Colorado, and Arizona, with her delivering viral, electric speeches alongside Bernie Sanders, who's now 83 years old and still breathing fire at these rallies.
We don't want a king in the United States. We overthrew a king. No, you're not going to destroy Social Security. You're not going to destroy Medicaid. You're not going to destroy the Veterans Administration. And I'll tell you what else you're not going to do. We're not going to let you undermine the democracy that men and women in this country have fought and died for.
This isn't just about Republicans either. We need a Democratic Party that fights harder for us, too.
With Sanders notably saying their stop in Denver drew a crowd of 32,000 people, bigger than he's ever seen before, and it's not even an election year. But also with this, Sanders told ABC that this tour wasn't just about whipping up excitement, it also had a strategic objective, with him explaining that they deliberately targeted states where Republican lawmakers won by thin margins in an attempt to put pressure on those congressional districts. Right, and adding there that if just 2 or 3 Republicans feel the heat and revoke their support for the GOP budget plan, then that could sink the whole thing. With Bernie then also sharply criticizing the Democrats, Chuck Schumer, and his decision to support the spending measure last week, but stopping short of endorsing a primary challenge against him. And in fact, when he was asked about it, first he cut off the interviewer right in the middle of his question.
Do you see her as a future of the progressive?
We have one of the untold stories.
And then, after getting pressed a second time, he just walked out of the interview.
Would you like to see her joining the Senate?
Right now, we have, as I said, just a whole lot of people in the Congress. Okay, Jonathan, thanks.
Wait, I got one more. This is important.
Well, I asked you.
Okay.
You want to do nonsense, do nonsense.
No.
I don't want to talk about inside the Beltway stuff. I got 32,000 people.
I was just asking you about AOC.
With all this, while of course the Democrats still have a few years before the next presidential election to figure out, how or whether they want to shake up the party leadership, we're already seeing the waters getting tested with, for example, a new Morning Consult poll of Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents eligible to vote in the 2028 primaries happening. And the number one pick by far was Kamala Harris with support from 36% of respondents, Pete Buttigieg coming in second at just 10%, followed by AOC, Tim Walz, and Gavin Newsom, all of whom got 5%. But again, that's one poll. There's so much time, even just before the midterms, and then obviously even further, the presidential race. So new leaders could rise, old ones could fall. Everything's up in the air right now. And what I will say here, that was the news. This part's my opinion. If the goal for the Democrats is to lose in 2026 and 28, they should just do more of the same. Against the people go and Chuck Schumer, baby. Also, when I say go, and I mean probably leaving the party. There was a recent opinion poll you might have seen from NBC. Only 27% of voters had a positive view of Democrats. That's reportedly the lowest it's been since they began that polling in 1990. Call me crazy for this, but it feels like there's a message there. But then, shifting gears from that, we start with the question, can you get away with not paying your taxes this season? But to be incredibly clear, I am not suggesting you break the law. I am a paranoid rule follower who pays his taxes 4 times a year. But today, that question is a relevant one because many people apparently think they can. With us now seeing the Washington Post reporting that the IRS has noticed an uptick in online chatter about individuals declaring their intent not to pay taxes this year, as well as intent to skip paying outstanding balances and to aggressively claim credits and deductions that they're not eligible for. Right, and all of this, according to 3 people with knowledge of tax projections who say the taxpayers are gambling that they won't get caught by auditors. And the most obvious reason they think this is because of DOGE, or because Donald Trump's IRS has already dismissed more than 11,000 workers and has moved to fire nearly 20,000 in total. And this is 2 agency commissioners have quit so far under his leadership, as well as the head of compliance. And then also in Congress recently, Republicans repealed over $20 billion in resources for the agency. And so according to several of the Post sources, the IRS has dropped investigations of high-value corporations and taxpayers because it's had to triage resources to keep internal systems operating. And of course, if they can't enforce it, then the law becomes more of a suggestion than an obligation. And so reportedly, Treasury Department and IRS officials are projecting tax revenue to plummet more than 10% by the April 15th deadline, leaving a more than $500 billion hole in the balance sheet, which is shocking on its own, but even more so considering that officials reportedly entered the filing season expecting to collect more revenue than last year. And it's also ironic because if the government ends up collecting less tax revenue, then it has to make up the difference by borrowing more money, which increases the deficit, something that Republicans claim to oppose. Though technically, they could also bridge the gap by cutting spending even more, but even with the huge cuts in their current budget plan, the deficit's still projected to increase, not decrease. Ultimately, we're gonna have to wait for the receipts to finish coming in this year before we see what actually actually happens, right? Before there is a verdict on tax compliance under the second Trump term. And then I've got more news for you in just a moment. But first, life's unpredictable. Whether it's a coffee spill, a surprise storm, or a puddle in your path, you need a shoe that won't slow you down. And so with that, let me ask, do you have a pair of Vessi's weekend sneakers yet? Because thanks to our sponsor, Vessi, they offer shoes and apparel designed to bring more yes into your life. Their sneakers, like all of their products, they're built for real life. Like when I'm out at my kid's game and it suddenly starts to rain, which may sound familiar. Or maybe when you're chasing your dog through wet grass or just enjoying an adventure without worrying about the weather or terrain, right? Vessi handles it all from sand to snow and everything in between. They've seamlessly blended style and function, right? These shoes have the look of stylish footwear.